These are 5 facts about Leon Scott Kennedy, one of the most loved protagonists of all survival horror genre, and these facts are from the Leon that we first know in the original game to way back in time when his desire to protect people and become a cop was born. Now, let's address a foundational question. Why was Leon late for his first day on the job in the original game? For years, the official story, tucked away in the game's manual and later confirmed in official Capcom files, and quite frankly, was almost comically mundane. On the eve of his first shift, Leon had just gone through a nasty breakup with his girlfriend. To drown his sorrows, he checked into a motel, drank himself unconscious, and consequently overslept, arriving in Raccoon City long after the apocalypse had begun. That simple, painfully human mistake is the only reason he wasn't at the Raccoon Police Department station when it was first overrun, a twist of fate that almost certainly saved his life. Now here's where it gets more interesting. This wasn't just random character flavor text. Director Hideki Kamiya later confirmed this backstory was directly inspired by an episode from his own life that occurred during the game's development. This decision was a deliberate act of character design. Kamiya has stated that he wanted Leon to be the antithesis of the first game's hero, Chris Redfield, whom he described as a blunt, tough guy type. To achieve this, he intentionally created Leon as, in his own words, someone with weaknesses. Leon's heartbreak wasn't just a convenient plot device, it was a core piece of his design, a foundational flaw meant to make him more relatable and vulnerable from the very start. But fast forward over 2 decades to the 2019 remake, and the story is completely different. Leon is now a more idealized, proactive hero. He wasn't heartbroken this time. He was officially told by the RPD to stay away. After days of silence and a growing sense of suspicion, his innate sense of duty compelled him to drive into town and investigate. This change, or retcon, cleans up his image, presenting a more professional and less flawed protagonist from the outset. But in doing so, it also reveals a fascinating shift in Capcom's storytelling philosophy, a change that reflects a broader evolution in how video game protagonists are constructed. In the other hand, the inversion of Leon's motivation is not merely a correction of the timeline, it is a deliberate rebranding of the character. The original Leon was a product of a design philosophy that valued vulnerability and saw a compelling story in a flawed person rising to an impossible occasion. His tardiness was a character flaw that paradoxically saved him. The new Leon aligns with a more modern market that often prefers idealized, competent heroes from the very beginning. His tardiness is now the result of a heroic instinct. This shift sacrifices a layer of humanizing depth for a more straightforward power fantasy narrative. It suggests that what was considered a compelling weakness in 1998 is now seen by some as an undesirable trait for a flagship protagonist. But as we'll soon see, a broken heart isn't the only tragedy that shaped him. But before Leon Kennedy ever appeared in a video game, he appeared on film, and his live-action debut wasn't directed by just anyone, it was helmed by a legend. To promote Resident Evil 2 Inches Japan, Capcom hired the one man who could be called the father of the modern zombie genre, George A. Romero. Therefore, in 1997, Romero directed this live-action TV commercial starring the late Brad Renfro as Leon and Adrienne Frantz as Claire. Due to contractual restrictions from Renfro's agent, who stipulated that the actor only be referred to as Actor X, the commercial was only ever shown in Japan. For years, it was a piece of lost media for most Western fans, a whispered about artifact from the series' early days. In the other hand, it's a fascinating time capsule, a direct, tangible link between the game franchise that redefined survival horror and the filmmaker who invented its most enduring monster. Poignantly, both the first live-action Leon, Brad Renfro, and the first voice actor for the character, Paul Haddad, have since passed away, making this footage an even more significant piece of the character's history. Therefore, this commercial is more than just a piece of trivia, it's a glimpse into an alternate timeline for the entire Resident Evil franchise. Romero was, at one point, hired to write and direct a feature film based on the first game. However, his script, which was a more faithful, horror-centric adaptation, was ultimately rejected by Capcom. The commercial is therefore the only existing footage of Romero's vision for Resident Evil, but his involvement legitimized the game's horror credentials at a crucial time. His eventual replacement by director Paul W.S. Anderson set the film franchise on a very different trajectory, one defined by slick, fast-paced action rather than the slow-burn dread and social satire for which Romero was known. The commercial, then, is a historical document of a creative path not taken, a tantalizing what-if for horror history. Now, coming back to Leon's character, Did you know that Leon Kennedy did not choose to become a government agent? He was forced to it. Multiple official sources, including character files published by Capcom, confirm that the government essentially blackmailed him into service. The price of his refusal? The safety and well-being of young Sherry Birkin. They held the life of a traumatized, G-virus-infected child over his head. His options were to become their weapon, or to let something terrible happen to the little girl he had just risked his life to save. He accepted the offer in exchange for assurances of her ongoing safety. But this forced recruitment is the key psychological event that transforms the idealistic rookie of Resident Evil 2 into the jaded, emotionally guarded veteran of Resident Evil 4 and beyond. His sarcastic quips and emotional distance are not just cool character traits, they are coping mechanisms. This is the story of a man living a life he never chose, a life born from a profound betrayal by the very system he once admired. In the other hand, the transition from idealist to cynic is a direct result of the trauma of Raccoon City being immediately followed by the moral injury of his coerced service. His heroism is now performed under duress, a constant reminder of the price of his survival. This reframes his entire career not as a heroic calling, but as a long, tragic sentence. He was forced to protect the innocent, but what if that mission started long before Raccoon City, born from a tragedy no one knows about? Now, did you know that in the early 2000s, Capcom was deep in development on the highly anticipated Resident Evil 4, but the game we eventually got was not the first version. The initial prototype, once again directed by Hideki Kamiya, was a very different beast, a stylish, action-heavy game set in a European castle, starring a superpowered hero named Tony, whose abilities were explained by biotechnology. But series producer Shinji Mikami felt the project had strayed too far from the franchise's survival horror roots, but instead of cancelling it, he made a pivotal decision. He convinced Kamiya to take the core concept and develop it as a brand new, independent game. The story was rewritten, the bio-enhancements became demonic heritage, and the hero Tony was reborn as the charismatic Dante. The game that was supposed to be Resident Evil 4 became the first Devil May Cry. Therefore, this fact positions Leon's character as a nexus of creative evolution at Capcom. The failure to make the initial Resident Evil 4 prototype fit the series mold directly led to the creation of an entirely new, wildly successful franchise that would go on to define the stylish action genre. In the other hand, it demonstrates a pivotal moment in game design history, where a willingness to pivot on a high-profile sequel, rather than force it into a box it no longer fit, resulted in two iconic and distinct series. Leon's sequel was so creatively ambitious that it literally broke the mold of its own franchise and had to become something new. Leon's history is full of ghosts, but the oldest one is the one that truly haunts him. We've seen how Leon's life was shaped by a director's confession, a horror legend's lost film, a government ultimatum, and a game that was never meant to be. Each of these facts adds a new, complex layer to his character. But we're about to reveal the one fact that provides the key to his entire identity. It comes from a source most fans have never seen, a source that has been buried in Japanese exclusive materials for over 2 decades. Now, if you appreciate this level of deep dive into gaming lore, now is the perfect time to subscribe and hit the notification bell if you would like to see more Resident Evil content. Now, you might have asked yourself, why did Leon Kennedy want to be a police officer in the first place? The games never reveals this fact, but a 1,998 Capcom published fanbook released only in Japan gives us a shocking and tragic answer. Now, according to this source, Leon had a rough childhood. His family was involved in heinous activities, and when Leon was just a child, they were all unalive. He was the only survivor, saved from the scene by a single, heroic police officer. That event, that one act of kindness and duty in the face of his family's destruction, is what inspired him to join the force. He didn't just want to protect and serve, he was on a lifelong mission to become the person who saved him. This changes everything. Suddenly, his entire character snaps into focus. His unwavering drive to protect the innocent, especially children like Sherry, is no longer a generic heroic trait. It's a deeply personal, psychological compulsion to prevent anyone else from suffering the kind of loss that he did. His recruitment by the government becomes even more tragic. The system he idolized for saving him is the very same one that betrayed and effectively imprisoned him. This obscure piece of lore isn't just trivia, it's the missing piece of the puzzle. It's the true, heartbreaking heartbreaking origin story of Leon S. Kennedy. In the other hand, the fact that Leon's most critical character motivation exists only in a piece of obscure, supplementary Japanese media highlights the fragmented and often contradictory nature of lore in a long-running franchise. It creates a sort of canon within the canon that enriches the character for those who discover it, suggesting that a character's true story is sometimes found not in the primary games, but hidden in the margins, rewarding the most dedicated lore hunters. It forces us to ask what canon truly means when the most profound truths are the best kept secrets. But who is Leon S. Kennedy? He's a man whose worst mistake was inspired by his creator's real life, a man whose first appearance was crafted by the master of zombies himself, a hero blackmailed into a life of service, whose personal quest for redemption was so creatively potent it spawned a whole other universe of demon hunters. And finally, he is an orphan, forever trying to become the hero he needed on the worst day of his life. These facts don't diminish the legend of Leon Kennedy. They give him a soul and makes him one of the most beloved characters in the survival horror genre. But that fanbook held one more secret. It mentions Leon carrying a lighter as a memento from his dad. Other conflicting pieces of lore, however, suggest his father was a police officer who was killed in the line of duty. So which is it? Was his father part of the criminal element that was destroyed, or was he the heroic cop who inspired Leon's journey? The two stories cannot both be true, but what is true is that Las Plagas was one of the greatest bioweapon that Leon had to fig, and in this next video, you will know where they came from. See you there.